This is a very quick rest day practice for the upper body to be used in the last few days of your cycle and the first few days of your bleed. So this is that time where we see a very sharp decline in hormones, and with that, maybe some of your energy is dissipating. So you might be a little bit quicker to fatigue. Maybe you don't have as much motivation to show up for your workouts. And we also see a rise in inflammation as the body prepares to shed the uterine lining. So we prepare for menstruation. With that, we want to avoid excessive exercise. We want to stay in low intensity mode, kind of these active rest practices that won't contribute to inflammation and that can even soothe inflammation by improving circulation throughout the body. So this practice is very gentle. It's body weight only. It's 1 part mobility, 1 part stretch. So you'll get a little bit of both for the upper body. It's a great complement to the strength work that we've been doing up until this point in the cycle. So we do have 11 different movements that we will perform 2 times through. So it's a 22-minute practice. You can always shorten the practice and leave after that first 11 exercises, so the first 11 minutes. Or you can add another round on if you choose to do so. So depending on how you're feeling, sometimes it might feel very soothing. You might get that little bit of an endorphin hit to improve mood during this time. So really just use your body as a guide. This one is not a high intensity practice by any means. So you can work with that flexibility to decrease or lengthen the time as appropriate for you. So I'll get our timer going here. We'll start in a tabletop position in about 20 seconds. So come down onto your mat, let your shoulders be over your wrists, the hips directly over the knees. So in our first movement pattern, we're going to be sweeping the arms. You want to spread the fingers nice and wide. Let your toes do the same. So spread the tops of the feet on the mat. And then we'll begin. So we reach it forward, sweep it back, and then reverse the direction, come back to table. Take your arm forward and back, move the hips at the same time. So you're creating this nice big arc with the arms just to get some mobility in the shoulders and the hips here, working into the knees and ankles a bit as well. So we're just sweeping back and forth. We have 1 minute continuous intervals. So we're kind of just moving fluidly from one exercise to the next. Sweep that arm back and around. So really try to explore the full range of motion in the shoulder. You can make it big or small, quick or slow. So this is that time in the cycle where it helps to still show up for your practice, but you can look forward to it more when you know you're going to be able to meet your body where you are. We're switching now to simple elbow taps. So walk your hands slightly forward so that your wrists are forward of your shoulders. Keep the arms parallel and simply tap the shoulders and come back up. Tap the shoulders down and come up. So again, this should feel really slow and steady, nice and easy. Press up and just start to feel that range of motion now in the backs of the arms. So we're dropping down and up. Try to keep the spine neutral so you're not overarching the spine as you come down, down, and press up. Spread the finger pads. This is a great way to kind of get into the rhythm and practice your mechanics. So feel how when you press through the finger pads, how that takes weight off the wrists so that you can carry that into your next workout, your next weighted practice. And come up. So into a kneeling position now. We'll start with the arms, the fists pointing toward each other at the chest. We open it out to the side, and then we're tapping opposite ankle while we reach the other arm overhead. Come up, bring the arms in, stretch them out, and then tap that back ankle, opposite arm reaches overhead. Arms to T, hug them in, reach out, and tap. So it's a little bit of a camel lean. You're getting a little bit of a stretch to the front side of the body. little bit of opening in the chest, but without strain. So this shouldn't feel like your max back bend. You want to keep the thighs pressing forward. You want to keep the chest and heart lifting, open and reach. Find again that big movement in the arms. So we're taking the limbs all the way out and all the way back. In, squeeze the biceps, then the triceps, and reach. We're coming back to that nice tabletop position, and we'll come into more of a half plank. So let your hips drop. We'll lower down all the way to the belly. Find baby cobra here. So legs stay planted. We lift the hands off the mat, come into cobra, squeeze the elbows behind, and then lower down, keep your knees planted, press up to that half plank. Once again, we lower down, lift the hands, baby cobra, and come back to center, press up. So it's a hand release push-up with a cobra lift. Lift up, come down, and press. So again, very easy work here. You might feel a little bit of heat, maybe a little bit of elevation in the heart rate, but this is a pace and an intensity that you could keep up for a very long time. It's below the 50% threshold if you're tracking your heart rate. Very easy for an active rest day. Come down. Now we're coming into half side plank with a lateral raise. So keep your knees down. Let your wrist be ahead of your shoulder so that you have a 90-degree bend between your arm and your body rather than between your arm and the floor. That compresses the wrist. Here we're going to take the arm by the side and simply reach it out and overhead and back down. So it's a lateral raise. Working again, the mobility, the range in the shoulder while stabilizing with the upper back and the shoulder of the bottom arm. Really brace the belly, so lift the hip points toward the low ribs. Again, this one is a good way to practice the mechanics of side plank. So getting your lower arm alignment to where it feels strongest. So again, that's finding the shoulder slightly behind the wrist, not directly over top. And then we'll switch. We'll bring the left hand down. We'll transition through downward dog in the center before coming to the other side. So we lift into that downward dog. You can keep your heels lifted here. This can be a nice, easy downward dog. Take your hands a bit wider than shoulder width, and then tiny bend of the elbows to bring the crown of your head toward your thumbs for a pike press. So you can bring the crown of the head all the way to the midline, to that center point between your thumbs, or it can be just a little bend, a little extend, little bend, little extend. The hips stay high, the heels stay lifted. We're just working again, the upper back and shoulders here, creating space. If this is too much, you can always take the knees down and be in the same range of motion. You get the same benefits in terms of mobility with a little less strain. So if you're finding that your heart rate is climbing or that the intensity is too much, you can always bring those knees down. After this, we'll be switching to the other side, side plank with a lateral raise. Now with your opposite arm down, so the knees stay grounded, and we simply reach over and back down. So these body weight practices, these active rest practices are a great way to help you still show up for your practice, that you can maintain that consistency. If you're someone like me who benefits from a little bit of movement every day just to keep me in the rhythm, then these are great ways to meet your body exactly where it needs to be during the premenstrual and bleed phase. If you are feeling bulletproof and the low hormones really land well with you, then you can continue lower intensity deload days and strength work, but adding more recovery in between. So this practice is qualifying for a recovery day. Last 3, 2, and 1. Now we're coming into upward table dips to boat pose. So turn the hands to face out, hug the heels of the hands behind you. We'll come up with the hips, lift up, and then dip the elbows. So bend the elbows to bring the hips down, and we reach into boat. Hands back into position, lift the hips, stretch the chest, lower it down, bring the hips toward your hands, come into boat. and we alternate. So we just flow between one and the other. Lift up. You can always keep the knees bent if you feel any strain in the lower back by straightening the legs. The key in boat pose is to keep your chest and heart elevated. So you're aiming heart, belly, chest toward the thighs. Breathing in and lowering down. We're here for one more press, and then we'll lower now to forearm side plank. So half forearm side plank, we're kind of taking the earlier progressions in all of these postures. So the knees stay down, and here we're simply doing a rotate. So it's like a rear delt fly without weight here. Just rotating that arm under and opening out to the side. Imagine someone pressing your top palm. So here, focus on stacking the shoulder over the elbow and stacking the hips one on top of the other. So the body stays stationary and we feel that strong activation in the side waist on the underside. So you can even get that feedback, feel that engagement underneath. And press into your forearm to continue lifting the hips away from the earth. We're here for a few more seconds, rotating and slowly transition back to your comfortable seat. This time, face your hands toward your heels. The fingers are facing forward. Keep the elbows nice and close, hugging in together. Try not to flare the low ribs. So if when you straighten your arms, your ribs flare, draw them back in. From here, we're simply tapping the elbows down and pressing up. So it's the reverse of kind of those elbow taps in the beginning, where we're in a seated position now, requiring a little bit more core activation. And try to isolate this to the triceps. So without using the legs, without gripping in the hip flexors, we're relying on the tricep strength and mobility to facilitate the movement. We're here for about 15 more seconds. And we're coming into the second side of that forearm side plank. That's our final exercise coming up. And then you have the option of calling it good if you feel complete with that practice, or moving through another round with me. So forearm side plank with that rotation. You can keep the knees down here. So stack hips, stack shoulders, and let's begin. Rotate it under and open up. Down and back up. So here again, now the underside is activating. Try not to let the shoulders come along for the ride as you rotate. So you're really focusing on core stabilization here. And this is a great one to practice too, without weight, without strain, so that you can feel in the different phases of the movement. So step by step, how that changes the engagement of your abdominals. So you feel the obliques firing. Notice how when you press into your forearm, you get a little bit more activation, a little more sensation. Open and rotate. Open, and here, this is always a great opportunity to connect to the rhythm of your breath. So deep in inhales and exhales, come out through the nose, come back to tabletop. We're coming back to those arm circles, so sweeping forward and back while lifting and lowering the hips. So the breath, such a powerful tool during this time where we're transitioning. We're going through that high to low hormone transition, which can feel a bit abrupt in the cycle. We have more of a stress response or sympathetic drive. So breathing more deeply, having these fluid practices where you connect with your diaphragmatic breath can help shift you into more of the parasympathetic mode. So that rest and digest mode where you are signaling to the body that we're okay. It's okay to devote resources to recovery and repair, that we are not in a state of alarm. And come back through center. Now we'll come through our elbow taps once again. So walk the hands slightly forward of the shoulders and we tap down. The goal here is to keep the arms parallel and to keep the shoulders relaxed away from the ears. Notice if you tend to shrug. So can you press down to create that spacious quality in the cervical spine and the neck? Tap it down and lift it up. Continue hugging the hip bones and the low ribs together to brace the belly here so we're not overarching the spine. Down and press up. Take it down and straighten. Keep that breath fluid. And you can also practice here mapping the phases of the breath onto the phases of the movement. So the exertion phase, which even though it feels light, you still have an exertion phase with these movements. That's when you exhale. So you can practice coming down on the inhale and exhaling to press up. Coming into our kneeling position next with our static T to elbow taps. So we bring the hands together in front, squeeze the biceps here, open it out to squeeze the triceps, and then reach your hand to your heel. Out, in, out, and back. So as you come back, keep the thighs pressing forward and lift up through the spine. So you feel that slight back bend, that awakening in the front body. Reach and come back. So squeeze the biceps, squeeze the triceps, and reach. Come through center, find that T, and reach. So this is mirroring some of the movements that we may have seen earlier in the cycle with that static T hold. So again, you're just practicing the skills, learning how to make them work for you. We're coming back to our tabletop position into half plank. So the hips drop down and the shoulders are over the wrists. Bend the elbows back to lower the body to the earth. Baby cobra, lift. Hands are off the mat. Hug your elbows behind. Come back down. Press up into half plank. We lower down. Baby cobra, lift. And to half plank. Press it up. Keep the elbows hugging in. They're parallel the entire time. And press up. Breathing here as you press up on the exhale. We inhale to come down. Exhale to back bend. Inhale, reset. Exhale, press up. So really find that rhythm and then change the pace of your movement to map onto that breath rhythm. So your breath guides the pace. Lift it up and come back to that half push-up. Now we're going to stack the knees, coming into half side plank with a lateral raise, sweeping that arm over and back to the side. So again, get your body into the right alignment so you have a little bit more space. Your bottom hand is out in front of that bottom shoulder. So you have that strong loading angle in the underside of the body. And then here, we're facilitating rotation in the shoulder. You can turn the palm and play with the hand position to see how it activates the shoulders and the back. So we reach out and overhead. As you reach overhead, you might create more of that arc shape in the body, that strong natural shape that we have available to us in the spine. Reach back and overhead. As we transition now, take both hands to the mat, come into either half downward dog or full downward dog for our pike press. So the hands are a little bit wider than shoulders, heels are lifted, you've got this strong axis of the spine, and we simply move it down toward the thumbs and right back up. Bend the elbows and extend the arms. So again, you can change the range of motion depending on how intense this feels for you. So if you're new to strength training, you're newly strengthening the shoulders, this might feel pretty intense. So you can just bring it down to the knees and practice the range of motion. So get a feel for moving the crown of the head forward and down along that diagonal, rather than pushing straight up and down like a chest push-up, like a standard push-up. This is a pike press where we're relying on the shoulders to create the range of motion. It's like gliding the spine on a track, forward and back. Now we're coming to the other side of our half side plank. So you can get your arm into position, stack the hips, stack the shoulders, and keep the knees down. Let's begin. Reach it overhead and back. So it's this lateral raise. Feel that full range of motion. taking it over, stretching the side waist, and reaching back. So these practices really serve to increase circulation. You're just inviting movement into the body to improve blood flow, and all of that can contribute to better periods. So it can help ease any bloating you might be feeling, and it can help promote healthy flow if you're in the early days of your period. Got about 15 more seconds here. And then we're coming into our upward table dips and boat pose in between. Reach and take it overhead. Slowly transition. We'll come onto a seat. So bring the heels of the hands in, fingers facing out, and let's lift it up. Upward table, stretch the chest. Take the hips back between the hands. Come into boat pose and reverse. So we come up. We're just alternating between these two postures, finding that rhythm and flow, trying to take out some of the hard edges so that as your hips touch down, your feet lift. As your feet touch down, your hips lift. So that you have that, almost that give and take, like you're transferring from one part of your body to the other. Nice and easy, nice and slow. Breathe in and out. And this is a time in the cycle, especially for me, the first 2 days of my period used to be really intense, really hard. And working out was always the last switch. Last thing on my priority list. We're coming into forearm plank next with the rotation. So stack the knees, stack the shoulders, and rotate. So when I had very painful periods, I'd have low mood, just really tired. It felt hard to even get out of bed. I either had to power through, ignore that signal, and override with things like coffee or painkillers just to get through the workout that I would then pay for later, or I would skip my workout altogether. So these two extremes that didn't allow much room for consistency, for support, for alignment. But now this is a practice that I can show up for, even when symptoms like that arise, even when I have some cramping or some fatigue, some malaise. These are the practices that continue to support me. And I love the idea. Let's switch. So we're coming into now reverse elbow dips. Take your fingers toward your heels and tap the elbows back and up. So I love the idea that we rest now so that we can work later. I like to see the luteal phase and your heaviest bleed days as sort of an investment opportunity. So we invest through rest, through active rest practices and recovery, so that we can then build our energetic wealth in the follicular phase, in the ovulatory phase, and even in the early luteal phase. So we make these investments, we replenish our energy account so that when we come back into the next cycle, when we start to come out of our period, our bleed tapers, then we have that energy, we have that investment to put into the next cycle. Coming into side plank next, forearm is down, hips are stacked. Let's lift it up and rotate. This is our last movement of this practice, so you should still be breathing nice and easy. You shouldn't feel overexerted or wrung out at all. Should feel just really supportive. Maybe a slight elevation in your mood. Maybe it feels like you sort of shake the cobwebs. Breathing in and out. Keep pressing down into that forearm. So we're still engaging in muscle activation, but in a lower intensity way that allows us to really tune into what's happening. So notice here, what can you take away from this lower intensity variation of forearm side plank that you can then carry into your next cycle of workouts. Last one here, open it up and then slowly come out. So this practice is gentle enough that you don't need a warm up or a cool down. That completes our practice together. If you wish, you can always rewind and go through another cycle of those 11 exercises, but that completes our time together for today. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for continuing to show up for yourself and for your body, and for letting that body be moved.